and welcome to the Sunshine Cathedral. We hope that you have enjoyed a wonderful holiday season, and as we enter this new year of 2015, we invite you to worship with us at the Sunshine Cathedral on Sundays at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you're in the Fort Lauderdale area, we're very easy to find. We invite you to worship with us in person, but if you're worshiping with us via the website, we say many blessings to you and hope that you will have an opportunity to visit our campus soon. But now, as we enter this new year of 2015, join us now for the exciting worship here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Our first reading this morning is a reading from the Wisdom of Abba. Rainbows introduce us to reflections of different, beautiful possibilities so that we never forget that pain and grief are not the final options in life. In these humans' words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is a reading from an Irish blessing. May God give you, for every storm, a rainbow, for every tear, a smile, for every care, a promise, and a blessing in each trial, for every problem life sends, a faithful friend to share, for every sigh, a sweet song, and an answer for each prayer. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
From the wisdom of the Torah, God said to Noah, "As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you." God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I will make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember my everlasting covenant with every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." In these human words, God's voice is heard.
The 136th Psalm says, "God's steadfast love endures forever." God's steadfast love endures forever. I want you to remember that. It's very important. God's steadfast love endures forever. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to need your help. It's going to become a little interactive in about 8 or 10 minutes. What we're going to do is, when the time is right, we're going to sing a chorus from a great old hymn of the faith. And I'll sing, it'll be like a call and response. I'll sing a line, and then I'll point to you, and you'll sing the next line. The words aren't going to be on the screen. You'll just know it, because it's that embedded in our consciousness. Like any of the old greats, Rock of Ages, we'll have a little test run. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Excellent. Last service, I totally forgot the whole thing. But I did. We had to go to another song because I just couldn't pull it to mind. But anyway, just like that. So I'll sing a line, I'll point to you, you'll sing the next line because you'll know it. P.S. It's not Rock of Ages. So, but first, let's get a running start at the flood narrative and the rainbow promise. In Genesis chapter 1, page 1 of the Bible, the earth is created. The story doesn't tell us what's going on in other planets, just that the earth is created. And then again in chapter 2, the earth is created. Anything worth doing is worth doing twice. Actually, Genesis chapter 2 is an older version of the story that we find in Genesis chapter 1. They come from different times. They come from different communities. They come from different storytellers. In the older version, which is chapter 2, God creates a man out of moist clay and breathes life into his nostrils. Almost a week later, God takes a rib out of the man and makes from the rib a woman. We don't know if this elective surgery was covered by the man's insurance, but apparently God thought it needed to be done, and so it was taken care of somehow. Eventually, on the advice of an unusually chatty snake, the newly formed humans eat some magic fruit, which is a deal breaker for their lease, and they get kicked out of the only home they've ever known. Now, who kicks them out? The God whose steadfast love endures forever. Well, in chapter 1, God creates the earth and everything in it. At the end of the creative process, God creates humans. This is very different than in chapter 2, where the man came first and then a week later comes a woman. No, in chapter 1, everything else comes first and then humans happen at the end. God doesn't make a clay man and a rib woman, but makes two humans simultaneously out of nothingness, or perhaps out of God's own life. As Genesis 1 tells us, that God created humanity in the divine image, both male and female. And the story goes on to say that God looked at everything that had been made and found it to be very good. Not just acceptable, not just savable, but very good. These are two different stories, these creation tales, though people often conflate them as if they were the same story. When so-called creationists claim to believe the biblical account of creation, I always wonder, which one? There are two contradictory tales. You can't take them both literally because they are too different in every detail. And P.S., there is no need to take either of them literally. Well, by chapter 4, so that gets us going, chapters 1 and 2, and then by chapter 4 in Genesis, this man and this woman, however they came to be, have had sons. And these sons have somehow found wives. Where'd the wives come from? Has God pulled off another creation in the neighboring county that no one thought was worth mentioning? Where'd the wives come from? These details never seem to bother the so-called literalist. Historic and scientific inaccuracies and internal contradictions and inconsistencies are simply glossed over. In fact, if you're going to pretend to be a biblical literalist, you've got to get really good at glossing over things. Well, in any case, the sons of the original mythic couple are named Cain and Abel, and they have a petty disagreement about whose offering to God is more acceptable. They each have an offering for God, and they have a petty disagreement over which one God finds most pleasing. And so the squabble escalates, and Cain kills his brother Abel. Over that. Just Cain kills Abel. Family values, you see. Well, Cain's punishment, such as it is, for his unprovoked murder is remarkably light. His punishment is he has to become a nomad. He has to roam around. He has to wander. He can't ever really settle down. Kill your brother over a silly little squabble. Your punishment is you don't get to put down any roots. Seems a little light. Meanwhile, in other places in Scripture, we are told that fortune-telling and children being habitually disobedient to their parents, and anyone doing work on the Sabbath, those things are all punishable by death. Cain has killed Abel. He doesn't get a permanent address. You talk back to your mom, it's death time. As decent human beings, we cannot unquestioningly accept those standards as being a model for our lives today. These ancient tales try to teach life lessons in their own context, such as choices have consequences, and jealousy leads to pain, and we are part of a divine order. They are not detailed, unbiased accounts of history, nor are they divine dictates of how we must behave, the do's and don'ts we must uncritically follow today. Well, we get through the creation and then the creation again, and then we get through Cain and Abel, and by chapter 6, the world is populated. Cain and Abel and their wives, wherever they came from, they've done a good job. They've populated the earth, and so by chapter 6, there's a lot of people on the earth, and male angels come from heaven and seduce human women. And their children were called Nephilim, or giants. I'm not making any of this up. Read it. It's there. The first 4 verses in chapter 6, the book of Genesis. So these angels come, they seduce women, and they have giant children. There's really not any smoother transition than that. Just boom, there it is. Well, God doesn't approve of this angel-human courting, and so God punishes humanity. Because humans seduce the angels? No, it's the other way around, but still, God punishes humanity by limiting their lifespan to 120 years. Still a pretty good run. But notice, the humans are punished, not the angelic seducers. Not terribly fair. I am totally convinced that supposed biblical literalists have either not read the Bible or they are not being honest about taking it all literally. And usually if you look at their tithe records, you know they don't take it all literally. But you can't take it all literally, you know, because of giants and magic fruit and talking snakes and angelic Casanovas and murder getting a divine finger wag while doing chores on the seventh day gets you stoned to death. Well, the story continues by telling us that God is sad, that humanity, after mixing with angel folk, has become pretty low rent. And so, like you do when you're disappointed with folk, God says, I will wipe out from the earth the humans whom I have created. And not just humans, but also the animals and the bugs and the birds, because I am sorry that I made any of them. Wait a minute, calm down. You're angry with some people who mated with angels. What did the bugs do? Why are you mad at the bugs? God, ease up on the sugar and switch to decaf. Or at least try to gain some perspective. Nevertheless, a man named Noah found favor with God. Lucky him. So God tells Noah how he can survive the upcoming aquatic apocalypse. Noah can build a big boat for his family and some animals, and after the lethal flood, they can repopulate the earth. But this kind and merciful deity that is willing to spare Noah doesn't want anyone else to be spared. When Noah's friends and neighbors beg to be saved, to be allowed on his big boat, Noah is to tell them, talk to the hand, and then watch them drown. God's steadfast love endures forever. But if we take these stories too literally, then we are not left with a loving or even sane God. If this behavior that we see from this understanding of God, if that is to be taken literally, if that is what God is, then that can't be love. Or if that's what love looks like, who needs it? Now it's time for us to sing a chorus of a hymn. Shot through the heart, and you're to blame. I played my part and you played your game. You give love a bad name. Exactly, perfect. They're singing that same song at Calvary Chapel and First Baptist. We all had a meeting. We're all doing that song today. Noah is said to have lived to be 950 years old. Another red flag, by the way, that this story isn't meant to be taken literally. 950 years old, y'all. Well, anyway. His family and a few animals survive and repopulate the earth. And we are expected to overlook the problem of the tiny gene pool from which this repopulation is to take place, though that would explain some of the people I've met. But whatever, it's only a problem if you take the story literally. But we don't take it literally. We take it seriously. Seriously enough to not diminish it by pretending that it could be literal. Well, after wiping out the entire earth, except for one family and some animals, God gets a bit of a conscience and says, you know what? That flood thing might have been harsh. So here's my promise. I won't ever flood the entire earth again. Doesn't promise to not flood 3/4 of it. Doesn't promise not to bulldoze it or commit global arson or to send flying ghouls to wreak havoc, but I won't flood the whole earth ever again. And then God sort of as a sticky note, so that God will remember this promise. God says, and so that to remind me that I've made this promise and to keep it, every time it rains, I'll put a rainbow in the sky. And God seals the deal with a rainbow. Because apparently, before that moment, light had never once reflected, refracted, or dispersed through water droplets. We took 4th grade science. I don't know what to tell you. Now, why is it important? And indeed, a faithful act to deconstruct these stories and make a point of naming what any mature reader of literature could deduce. I'll tell you why. Because by not doing it, we have allowed the most extremist, the most abusive, the most oppressive factions of society to commit atrocities in the name of religion. As one of the verses in the great Bon Jovi hymn states, "An angel's smile is what you sell. You promise me heaven, then put me through hell." I think most people in this room have had that experience under a church ceiling somewhere. In the name of savage biblical literalism, gay children have been robbed of their self-esteem. They have been robbed of their dignity. They have been robbed of their homes and their families, and sometimes they have been robbed of their lives. Women have been condemned to abusive marriages and kept away from altar and pulpit. Women's bodies have been colonized by male-run institutions. Slavery, war, xenophobia, and genocide have all been committed in the name of God, always with a verse from the Bible used as a proof text, as a weapon. We must read our stories critically to protect them from those who would use them in vile ways to abuse the planet, or oppress LGBT people, or silence women, or mistreat children, or wage senseless war. If we choose to believe that God is love, then we must beat biblical swords into plowshares and scriptural spears into pruning hooks. We cannot allow our sacred stories, some of which are funny, most of which are not literal history. We cannot allow those sacred texts to be the excuse used to oppress and marginalize people any longer. Enough is enough. We say God is love, but then we let the most aggressive and abusive factions of our faith give divine love a bad name. Shot through the heart, and you're to blame. I played my part, and you played your game. You give love a bad name. Now, there is something to be salvaged from our deconstruction today. And that's what we're always doing. We always deconstruct to reconstruct something better. The prophet Ezekiel had a vision of God being like a rainbow. Many colors, beautiful light, overarching, always present on the heels of storms, a symbol of diversity, of peace that returns after troubled times, something that can be experienced by anyone, anywhere. God isn't limited to harsh, angry, mean-spirited readings of ancient texts. God is like light, always available, appearing after times of distress and hardship to renew our hope and restore our peace. We must stop reading our prejudices into the Bible and then worshiping the misunderstood Bible as if it were God. God is bigger than the Bible. God is love. But when we don't think critically about religion, we give God, divine love, a bad name. We long ago reclaimed the rainbow, that symbol of beauty, that symbol of the beauty of diversity. Now it's time to reclaim the Bible for ourselves and no longer let it be used to give the love that God is a bad name. If the Bible has been used to torment you, then I'm here to offer some hair of the dog, or maybe hair of the God, that bit you. We are going to take back the Scriptures, see what they say directly to us in our own context, find our lives in the stories, and not give the Bible over to those who only wish to use it as a weapon. God is all-inclusive, unconditional love, and from this moment on, we will not let divine love be given a bad name, and this is the good news. Amen.
Hello, I want to thank you for joining us for worship today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. Again, if you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, please stop by and worship with us on Sundays at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to find out more about the Sunshine Cathedral, about our resources, or about our books published by our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, or if you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, may God continue to richly bless you on your journey.